the last 10 years, there have been a lot of different aesthetics that have cropped up. Plenty have overlap with each other, such as cottagecore and goblincore. Some are offshoots of another popular aesthetic, such as dark fairycore. There are micro-labels for just about all the main aesthetic flavors out there. A popular aesthetic I'm sure many of you know is cottagecore. It has its own offshoot that I'm particularly attracted to, cottagegore. Hi, I'm Fox, any pronouns. I'm no fashion expert, and my own personal style varies wildly. In most of my videos, I am naked. But it's okay, because I have fur. But just because I'm not always dressing up in a particular aesthetic doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. So let's talk about cottagecore first. If you type in what is cottagecore into any search engine, you'll get plenty of articles with similar descriptions. Here's what cottagecore looks like. It is dollies, snails, and DIY fairy spoons crafted from seashells. It is illustrations from Frog and Toad, stills from Miyazaki movies, two girls kissing in a forest in springtime. Cottagecore is an aesthetic that celebrates simple living, particularly in the countryside. It encourages a lifestyle rooted in traditional skills, like baking bread, gardening, and sewing your own clothes. As a concept, it embraces a simpler, sustainable existence that is more harmonious with nature. Aesthetically, it's a nod to the traditional English countryside style, romantic and nostalgic. It could be the beginning of a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, before the inevitable darkness seeps in. But rather, it's the backdrop of a budding aesthetic movement called cottagecore, where tropes of rural self-sufficiency converge with dainty decor to create an exceptionally twee distillation of pastoral existence. A lot of flowery words, but I suppose that's fitting. At the heart of it, cottagecore is about harmony with nature, the simple life, domestic coziness, a romanticization of the rural, and a past that seems to have only existed in storybooks. Overall, the aesthetic feels kind, nurturing, like people crafting a world outside of our capitalistic hellscape, one that's welcoming of marginalized identities. Not to say there isn't racism within subsets of the community, and of course you'll have a lot of white supremacist trad wife types cropping up. But I have seen a really loving community within this subculture, especially within the queer sapphic parts. Honestly, if you want a good, quick rundown of cottagecore, the aesthetics fandom wiki page on it seems pretty solid. There are also some great videos I'll link down below that get more into detail about cottagecore as a whole, what it entails, and how to start incorporating the aesthetic into your wardrobe/life. The origins, as with many internet-based things, are hard to pinpoint. Cottagecore seems to have popped up originally around 2017, gaining an official name in 2018. However, it was during the early years of the pandemic, back when people actually took some precautions, that it really seemed to blow up in popularity. Overalls, Amanita muscaria mushrooms, fairy houses, and gardens both tended but organic reigned supreme in cottagecore. But we're not here to talk about just cottagecore. What I really appreciate is cottagegore. For as much as cottagecore is about coziness and optimism within nature, cottagegore is about paranoia and an admittance that nature is not always beautiful. Cottagecore has deer. Cottagegore has their bones. Cottagecore has cozy cottages in the woods. Cottagegore has dark cabins in a darker forest. Cottagecore has flowers and mushrooms. Cottagegore knows which are poisonous. Cottagegore, also known as dark cottagecore, is pretty self-explanatory. Personally, I love the darker, spookier vibes it brings to the aesthetic. It also plays on some criticism of cottagecore, specifically how idealized it is. Cottagegore acknowledges a drearier side to nature and living off the land, of how not every day is bright and shining. Sometimes it rains, and the rain is so important, even when it can be deadly. You'll find a lot of overlap with other subcultures like goblincore, forestcore, crowcore, or witchcore. Type in cottagecore into places like Tumblr and you'll find those tags too, along with abandoned places being taken back in by nature, dark figures stalking through the fields, apothecary bottles filled with unknown plants, skeletons that walk, fog and dirt and grime, and a certain sort of melancholy that's welcomed. There was a quote I read earlier about cottagecore being like a fairy tale before the grim parts set in. Cottagegore is when the idealistic story slips away and the grim settles in. The original fairy tales, before Disney commodified and sanitized. More folk horror than folk art. Cottagecore is grittier, dirtier, yet no less beautiful. There is death, but you can't have death without life. It deserves to be acknowledged, respected, celebrated. One can certainly dwell on just the darkness of cottagecore, seeing something as reverent as blooming nature suddenly cast in a dense fog as pessimistic, nihilistic. I see it as hopeful. It is macabre, rougher around the edges, but that doesn't mean evil. Even though it is a dark, tough environment, there is still life and love in cottagecore, and so much beauty to find. You might think to yourself, wow, there sure are a lot of micro-aesthetics, and so many overlap. Are they really needed? I don't know. I just think they're neat. It's fun, it brings people joy, and it fosters communities. It inspires people, helps them branch out of the comfortable and embrace something new that makes them feel more them. More who they want to be. Nothing wrong with that. But if your community has Nazis in it, weed those out quick. That's all I have to say here. I hope your 2024 is going well. And hey, I'd love to know what niche core aesthetics you're getting into. Cryptid core is another great one that fits well with cottagecore. Weird core is just my life. I'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining my lucid screaming.